The most dangerous message in diplomacy is the one delivered without words. No press conference, no official statement, just a photograph. And this one photograph may have just told the world exactly what Washington is planning to do with Cuba. If this is your first time following this story, hit subscribe now. We are tracking this daily, and the next development could drop at any moment. Marco Rubio, the United States Secretary of State, walked into Southern Command headquarters in Miami this week and posed for a photograph. Behind him, covering nearly the entire wall, was a large operational map. Not of Latin America, not of the Caribbean, Cuba. Specific provinces, key cities, topographical military features. When reporters asked why he stood in front of it, Rubio said, and this is a direct quote, "I thought it would be fitting." Fitting. Hold that word. We are coming back to it. 6 weeks before that photograph was taken, the man standing next to Rubio in it, General Francis Donovan, the newly confirmed commander of Southern Command, sat before the United States Senate Armed Services Committee and was asked a very specific question. If the Cuban government collapsed, did his command have the capability to respond? His answer was not a diplomatic non-answer. It was a number. "Senator, we have the capability to secure key points of entry and establish humanitarian corridors within 72 hours of a decision to act." 72 hours. 3 days. From a standing start to boots on the ground in Cuba in 3 days. Generals do not give senators numbers like that unless those numbers have been verified, tested, and confirmed against real assets and real logistics. You do not say 72 hours to the United States Senate under oath unless you are prepared to be held to it. Stay with this, because what we are about to show you connects that Senate testimony, that photograph, and a 30-year military plan that most Americans have never heard of. And once you see how they connect, you cannot unsee it. The State Department described Rubio's visit to Southern Command as routine, a coordination meeting covering counter-narcotics, regional security, and persistent threats in the Western Hemisphere. No transcript was released. No pool reporters were present. The photograph appeared on Rubio's official social media at 2:47 in the afternoon. Rubio to the left, Donovan to the right, Cuba on the wall behind them. And before the day was out, Rubio told reporters something else. Significant changes are forthcoming. He did not elaborate. He did not need to. Cuba's foreign minister responded within 24 hours, calling the image a deliberate provocation designed to intimidate the Cuban people. State media in Havana broadcast the photograph alongside commentary identifying Rubio as the most anti-Cuban figure in Washington. Meanwhile, Cuban exile networks in Miami circulated the same photograph as confirmation that the administration is serious. Two completely opposite audiences looked at the same image and reached the exact same conclusion. Something is being prepared. Now, here's where it gets more complicated than a simple military threat. And this is the part of the story that almost no one is covering. General Francis Donovan is not a symbolic appointment. He spent the last 3 years as deputy commander of U.S. Central Command, the command responsible for the Middle East, for operations in Iraq and Syria, and for the recent strikes against Iran. Donovan was in the planning rooms. He understands amphibious deployments, sustained ground presence across hostile territory, and humanitarian corridor logistics at scale. His appointment to Southern Command, his Senate confirmation, his 72-hour answer, and now this photograph do not exist in isolation. They exist in sequence. And sequences, unlike coincidences, have destinations. According to a 2024 Rand Corporation study, Southern Command has maintained invasion contingency plans for Cuba continuously since 1996, revised every 18 months. The scenario the study modeled is labeled humanitarian intervention following state collapse. It involves 50,000 U.S. troops, the establishment of control over Havana, secured ports, and refugee processing centers. Estimated cost, $180 billion over 3 years. That plan is not theoretical. It has been updated 14 times since it was first written. The general who now commands it just told the Senate he can execute the opening phase in 72 hours. But here is the dimension of this strategy that changes everything, and it is not a military one. On April 2nd, the U.S. Treasury Department sanctioned 17 senior Cuban military officers for the systematic repression of peaceful protesters. Not the Cuban government broadly, not abstract institutions, specific named individuals, 3 regional commanders, the head of Cuba's National Revolutionary Police. Their assets in American financial institutions are frozen. Accounts in cooperating nations are exposed to seizure, and this matters enormously when you understand what those officers actually are. The Cuban military, through a network of state enterprises, controls approximately 60% of the national economy. Tourism, hotels, telecommunications, construction, import and export. Cuba's generals are not ideological warriors living austere revolutionary lives. According to a 2023 report by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, senior Cuban military officers hold luxury apartments in Madrid, bank accounts in Caribbean tax havens, and substantial property holdings in Spain, Mexico, and Panama. These are men with financial portfolios that depend entirely on access to the international banking system. And Washington just made those portfolios vulnerable. The calculation being engineered is not a battlefield one. It is a financial one. Stay loyal to a government that is sinking and watch your foreign holdings disappear one sanction at a time. Or negotiate an exit, cooperate with a transition, and keep what you have. The photograph with General Donovan delivers both messages at once. We have the military option if you force it. We have the financial arrangement if you choose it. Your map is on the wall, and we are standing in front of it. There is a final layer here that explains why this is happening now rather than in 2 years or 5. Cuba's intelligence services are not confined to Cuba. They are embedded inside Venezuela's security apparatus. Cuban officers train Maduro's forces, advise on surveillance methods, and help identify dissidents. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees has documented that over 7 million Venezuelans have fled since 2015, the majority citing violence and political persecution. The Cuban intelligence infrastructure is a structural component of the system producing that humanitarian crisis. If the Cuban government falls, Venezuela's security apparatus loses its most experienced external partner. The intelligence advisors go home or disappear. The surveillance architecture degrades. Senator Bob Menendez addressed this directly in a Senate floor speech on April 28th. The collapse of the Cuban regime, he said, would represent a strategic earthquake across the Western Hemisphere. Venezuela, Nicaragua, Bolivia. One domino, one chain. Cuba is the first. What Rubio is running, when you map it across 5 months of escalation, is a dual-track strategy. The visible track is economic and narrative. Oil blockades, banking sanctions, the Starlink offer publicly designed to be refused. Language like incompetent communists and failed state, each phrase chosen to build a legal and political justification architecture for what comes next. The invisible track is military and financial. Donovan's confirmation, the continuously updated operational plan, the sanctions targeting not governments, but specific generals with specific foreign bank accounts. Each track reinforces the other. The economic pressure weakens the institution. The military positioning removes the option of resistance. The targeted sanctions on individual officers create the defection incentive that could make military action unnecessary. And here is what concerns me most. And I say this having covered geopolitics for long enough to understand what internally consistent strategies actually look like. The Iraq strategy was internally consistent. The Libya strategy was internally consistent. The Afghanistan strategy was internally consistent for 20 consecutive years. In every case, the planning architecture was coherent. The outcome was catastrophe. The difference with Cuba is 90 miles. There is no ocean to cross. There is no coalition to assemble. There is no buffer zone between a miscalculation and its consequences arriving on American shores, in American hospitals, in American cities. Cuba's Revolutionary Armed Forces have been preparing for this specific scenario for 67 years. The asymmetric resistance doctrine, the underground infrastructure built during the Cold War, the militia training embedded in schools and workplaces across 3 generations. Southern Command updates its plan every 18 months. Cuba's counterplan has the advantage of terrain, of history, and of a population that has been told since childhood that this moment was coming. Donovan told the Senate 72 hours to establish the corridors. What no general says out loud, because generals do not say this part, is how long it takes to leave. I want to be direct with you. I have been tracking this Cuba story daily across this series, and I have been resisting a conclusion for weeks because the implications of it are too significant to state casually. I think a decision has been made, not in writing, not in a form that triggers congressional war powers notification, but in the way that actually matters in statecraft. The trajectory has been locked in. The narrative justification is being constructed in public. The military positioning is being confirmed in Senate testimony. The financial pressure is being applied to the specific individuals whose defection would make intervention unnecessary or whose loyalty would make it required. I could be wrong. I have been wrong before, and I will be wrong again. But I know the difference between coincidence and sequence. Coincidence is random. Sequence moves toward something. And what I have watched unfold since the oil blockade began does not look random. It looks like a sequence that is approaching its final chapters. The options on the table as best I can reconstruct them. A military intervention that Donovan has confirmed he can initiate in 72 hours. A managed collapse engineered through economic strangulation and elite defection. A negotiated transition where the generals trade their loyalty for their Madrid apartments. Or something no analyst has fully modeled yet. Each of these ends differently. Each of them changes the hemisphere. There is one line I keep returning to. When Rubio was asked why he stood in front of that map, he said he thought it would be fitting. Fitting. That is the word you choose when something belongs exactly where it is, when the image and the moment are aligned, when what is visible is also what is true. I think he chose that word on purpose, and I think he meant every letter of it. Based on everything you have followed in this series, the blockade, the sanctions, the Senate testimony, the photograph, what do you think happens next? Military action, elite defection, a negotiated deal, or something none of us have mapped yet? Tell me in the comments. This audience has called every major escalation before it became headlines, and I believe the next one is close. If this gave you clarity on what is actually being built between Washington and Havana, share it with one person who needs to understand what is coming. Hit the like button. One tap is what moves this past the algorithm. And if you are not subscribed yet, now is the time. We are updating this story every single day. And based on the pace of these developments, the next chapter will not wait.